Hello guys, welcome back to the assignment series. In today's video, I'm going to be breaking down step by step on how to buy an assignment sale. So let's dive right in. I'm going to be covering very high level what the process is like. Unlike resale properties and purchasing resale properties, assignments can be a little bit more complex. However, it is simple when you break it down to steps. So assignments, as you know, can be very lucrative depending on the market. I think I've covered this before. In a seller's market, the original buyer can make a lot of profit through capital appreciation as well as forced appreciation. And in a buyer's market, there is an oversupply of assignment listings and they're incredible deals for buyers. So right now, when we stand in November of 2023, we are in a pretty oversupplied assignment market. A lot of pre-construction buyers from 3 to 4 years ago who have their closings coming up now are finding themselves in a tough spot financially just because of interest rates being so high, and they're finding themselves not being able to close on properties. In many cases, they're distressed sellers who are, in some cases, walking away from profit. So it can be an incredible time for some buyers. So step one is pretty obvious. It's to get pre-approved, right? This goes even for resale, the same exact process. You want to make sure you know what your budget is so you're not overstretching yourself and not wasting a lot of time looking at assignment deals that don't fit your budget, that don't make sense. It gives you a competitive edge, getting a pre-approval, similar to in resale, because you know what your budget is and you know what price point you need to look at. And also, it gives you leverage when you are negotiating a deal with the seller. It's also time saving, right? You're not spending a lot of time to go to a mortgage broker or lender, scrambling last minute within your conditional period and stressed out throughout the process. So it saves you a lot of time. And it also signals serious intent to the seller, right? So if you are a seller, let's imagine, and you have a buyer that comes to you that has a pre-approval done, you would naturally consider that buyer to be more serious, right? So it gives you another competitive edge when you're putting in an offer, knowing that this is a serious buyer that's likely to close on the property. Step two is finding a deal, right? So let's say you find an assignment deal that you actually like the location, you like the value. Now you're wondering, okay, am I overpaying? What's the market price like? So with assignments, you want to make sure you do your due diligence by looking at some comparative properties that are selling in that area, apples to apples. You want to look at newer homes within that range, within that area, and just as close to it as possible to see what the market value of that property would be. You also want to make sure that assignments that are closing in 6 to 8 months, let's say something's closing or occupying, half a year from now or even a year from now, you have to almost make sure you do your due diligence to see, will this property actually appraise in 6 to 8 months? What kind of market are we shifting into? Are we in a shifting market, or is this market showing signs of resiliency? Is it going up in value? So that'll give you an idea of what that should look like. And we'll talk about appraisals too and how you can actually get it done at the time of purchase. You also need to analyze if you are an investor, right? What does the investment analysis look like? Is this a property, if you rent out, are you going to cash flow? Are you going to be negative cash flow? And if so, how much? So you want to look at the vacancy rates, the comparative rents in the area to see what kind of returns you can expect with a property like this and how soon you can rent it. And of course, if you're an end user, you want to make sure that this is a property that you actually like, that you see yourself living in. Lastly, list price versus market value, right? You want to make sure that when you're looking at assignments, you want to be able to look at not just the price it's listed at, but what is the true market value of this property, right? Are you in fact overpaying, or are you actually getting a deal? With assignments, most of the time, they are under market value simply because the seller is looking to get out of the deal and the new buyer is looking to get a deal. Otherwise, they would be looking in the resale market. So most of the time, assignments have to be a win-win situation for both the buyer and the seller, right? So the seller in most cases is making some sort of profit and walking away from the profit and their original deposits. And the buyer should be able to come in and get and secure something under market value. Step three is getting the original agreement of purchase and sale. Now, of course, this is received from the original buyer. You want to make sure you get the agreement to ensure that, okay, what's the original purchase price? What are the payment schedules like? What payment schedule did they have with the builder? And what deposits have they already paid? And it also obviously helps you draft the offer because there are things in there that you need to draft and write up the offer. Step 4, of course, is preparing the offer, right? So preparing the offer, you want to look at things like putting in the price, how much deposit you want to put right off the gate upon acceptance of the offer. You want to put the assignment closing date, when you actually want the assignment deal to firm up or becoming a binding agreement. You want to obviously put in your conditions and clauses to make sure you're protected against any for example, lawyer review. You want to do financing review condition on there. You want to do a builder consent. I have a whole video on assignment conditions and clauses that you need to be putting, so make sure to watch that. I'll link it somewhere here. And of course, you want to look at the deposit schedule for deposit payout. So this pertains specifically to not just the deposits that the original buyer has paid to the builder, but in what order or in what schedule are you paying back that buyer their deposit. So are you paying them all the deposits up front? Are you paying them part of it up front and the remaining, let's say, profit on closing? Everything's negotiable in an assignment deal. So in this agreement, in the offer, is where you actually lay out those payment schedules. Now, of course, once the offer is accepted, your deposit is due within 24 hours, which is held in trust, very similar to a regular resale transaction. Step 5 is fulfilling conditions. So once the offer is accepted, it goes into the conditional period, at which point, you're going to send your agreement to a lawyer for review. Your lawyer is going to look for everything in there because it's a complex deal. They're pretty lengthy. The lawyer will make sure that there are nothing in there that doesn't protect you, right? They're going to do a review of any closing adjustments that you need to be aware of or anything in there that goes against your interests. The lawyer will always tell you what consequences there may be in the event the builder, for example, fails to complete the project, depending on how early in the stage it is, or any other risks you might be taking by buying the assignment. Of course, you want to do your financing fulfillment. So in that time of your financing review, you want to make sure you go back to the lender, the mortgage broker, and get them to reassess the pre-approval based on that property. You also want to get the documents from the seller at this point, any amendments they have, any other correspondence with the builder. I always ask the seller at this point to also get a full proof of deposits that are already paid. I want to see the proof of deposits. I want to see the receipts to make sure that the deposits that were supposed to pay to the builder have been paid, that they're not in default. And of course, at this time, you also want to get builder consent. The builder has to consent to the agreement, right? Just because the buyer and seller agree to the assignment doesn't mean it's now firm and binding. The builder also has to give their consent. Otherwise, there's no deal. Step 6 is getting occupancy, right? So this is when the building or property is ready to be occupied. It's safe to move into. The pre-delivery inspection is done. And this is when you go into interim occupancy. So in assignments, in pre-construction, there are 2 closings, interim occupancy and final closing. Interim occupancy is when you get the keys, when it's safe for you to move in, but it hasn't actually registered with the city yet. So in that time, you're paying occupancy fees. So that's when you start paying the builder what's called interim occupancy fees. Sometimes it's called ghost rent. It's really comprised of 3 things. That is interest on the balance that's due to the builder. You've got property taxes and then maintenance fees. So those 3 make up the occupancy fees that you're paying to the builder every single month. It does not go towards your mortgage or towards building equity. Of course, at this point, you also want to consider, if you're an investor, are you going to rent it out? If you're an end user, are you going to move in? So, make sure that you give yourself enough time before occupancy to actually go and look for a tenant if that is the case. And if you're obviously moving in, be prepared to start paying occupancy fees, in which case you do have to provide the builder with 12 post-dated checks. Last step is final closing. So typically within, sometimes it's as early as 30 days or 10 days right before final closing, the builder will actually tell you, hey, we're coming up for final closing, get your financing in order, and you have to be ready. So I always advise clients to always be ready when they're in occupancy, to constantly speak to a mortgage broker lender to make sure that they're in a good financial position to close at any time, because the closing and the registration is dependent on the city, not the builder. The builder won't exactly know when the final closing is, but they will give you somewhat of a heads up. So be prepared to close on the property on short notice. Of course, this is when you want to get a lawyer to close on the transaction, so the lawyer can, effectively transfer title and also a good time to be prepared to pay HST if you are an investor. And in a lot of cases, if you're also an end user, buying on an assignment, some builders won't actually give you the HST rebate. You may actually have to pay that HST on closing and apply for the rebate yourself. So this really varies from builder to builder. The last few assignment deals that I've done, the new buyer has had to pay HST on closing. However, because one of them was an investor, they were able to apply for the rebate by putting a tenant in there, and the other was an end user who was also able to do the same and get the rebate. The rebate typically takes between 8 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks if you do or send all the paperwork, and the CRA will either send you a check, or if you have direct deposit, deposit it directly into your account. This is when you also get your final statement of adjustments, and HST is a part of that, obviously. In the final statement of adjustments, you have your closing costs, any adjustments that you owe to the builder. Your lawyer will prepare all the statement of adjustments for you, so you have to bring that check. So be prepared to have cash on closing, and your lawyer, in that lawyer review that we talked about previously, will walk you through what the adjustments should look like, so you can account for that additional cash on closing, and whatever time you have between occupancy and final closing. Step 8, you're officially on title. So you take title to the property, you're officially the owner, and you can go out and celebrate. Lastly, I always say this to everybody, is make sure you work with an experienced agent that is knowledgeable in assignments, right? Look, doesn't matter if you use me or you use somebody else. Well, I hope you use me, and I wish that you use me for assignments. But whoever you end up using, make sure that they are knowledgeable and proficient in doing assignment sales, because they can be quite complex, and you want to make sure you have an experienced agent on your side when negotiating a deal for you, but also making sure that you are not getting stuck in a deal that can bring unnecessary consequences. So anyways, guys, I hope this video helped. If it did, you know how to get in touch with me. My contact details will be somewhere in the description below, so feel free to reach out to me anytime. Thanks for watching. Take care.